The champagne was already open when I got to the table. My husband had chosen the restaurant, of course. He always chose the restaurant. Magnolia's on 5th, the kind of place in Charlotte where the hostess knew your name before you said it, and the menu had no prices, because if you had to ask, you probably shouldn't be there. He'd made the reservation 3 weeks in advance and told me to wear something nice, the green dress, the one he'd picked out for my birthday last spring. I remember thinking it was sweet, how much he paid attention to those things, how carefully he noticed everything. He was already seated when I arrived, jacket pressed, hair just so, the way he always looked when he wanted something to feel like an occasion. He stood when he saw me crossing the room and smiled the way he'd smiled the first night we met at my cousin's wedding in Asheville, like I was the only person in a very full room. 2 years of marriage, and he still did that. I used to think that meant something. "You look beautiful," he said, and kissed my cheek. I sat down across from him. The champagne was already poured. 2 flutes, pale gold under the candlelight, and I reached for mine without thinking, the way I always did, because in 2 years I had never once thought to question what my husband handed me to drink. I should have started questioning a long time ago. The restaurant hummed around us, low music and quiet conversation and the sound of silverware against porcelain. He was telling me about a deal he was closing, something with a property developer in Raleigh, and I was nodding along the way I always did when the business talk started, because I never fully understood it, and he never fully explained it. He had a talent for making things sound detailed without actually saying anything specific. I mistook that for intelligence for a very long time. I was 29. A second-grade teacher at Brookfield Elementary, which my husband had always found charming in the particular way wealthy people find things charming when those things cost them nothing. My father had died 14 months ago, a heart attack at 61, and he had left me the house in Mooresville and a life insurance policy I hadn't fully processed because grief doesn't work on anyone else's schedule. My husband had been very helpful during that time, very present. Very good at knowing when to hold my hand and when to step back and let me cry. I understand now that what I mistook for sensitivity was actually inventory. My phone was face down beside my bread plate. He'd asked me not to bring it to dinner, and I'd compromised by bringing it but keeping it silent. Somewhere around the time the appetizers arrived, it buzzed twice against the tablecloth. He was mid-sentence about the Raleigh developer, and I watched his eyes flick to the phone and back to me just for a second. "You're not going to check that?" he said. Later, I said. He smiled. "Good." I waited until he excused himself to use the restroom. Then I flipped the phone over. The first message was from my sister. The second was from a number I didn't recognize. No contact saved, local Charlotte area code. I almost scrolled past it. I almost left it for later, the way he'd suggested. The message said, "I'm the woman in the blue cardigan at the bar. Don't look up yet. I need 3 minutes of your time. Please come to the ladies' room. Don't tell your husband." I looked up anyway. I couldn't help it. There was a woman at the bar, mid-40s, dark hair cut short, a blue cardigan, and a glass of red wine. She wasn't drinking. She was looking at me. She didn't smile. She just gave the smallest possible nod toward the back of the restaurant, toward the hallway where the restrooms were, and then looked away. My husband was gone for maybe 4 minutes, which is longer than most people take. I've thought about that timing since. I've thought about whether he knew, whether he was stalling, whether the whole evening had already started to slip in a direction I couldn't see. I don't know. What I know is that I had 4 minutes, and I used them. The hallway was narrow and dim, exposed brick on both sides, the kind of decor that costs 3 times as much as drywall. The women's restroom was at the end. The blue cardigan woman was already inside, standing near the window, and when I pushed through the door, she locked it behind me without asking. "I know this is terrifying," she said, "and I know you have no reason to trust me, but I need you to hear me out before you decide I'm crazy." "Who are you?" I said. "My name is Detective Renee Calloway. I'm with the Charlotte-Mecklenburg Police Department, Financial Crimes Division." She showed me a badge. "And the man you came here with tonight is not who you think he is." I have replayed this moment in my mind more times than I can count. The way the fluorescent light hummed above us, the way my hands went very still at my sides, the way some part of me, some quiet part that had been trying to get my attention for months, went, "Oh, not surprised, just finally heard. "His name is not Daniel Mercer," she said. "His real name is Tyler Bowman. Before he was Daniel Mercer, he was Caleb Ford in Memphis. Before that, he was Marcus Allen in Richmond. He has married 3 women in the last 7 years. Every single one of them had recently inherited money from a deceased parent. Every single one of them reported chronic fatigue, memory problems, and unexplained health symptoms in the months before he left. One of them lost her inheritance to a series of forged investment documents. One of them had a breakdown so severe she was hospitalized for 6 weeks. One of them," she paused. "One of them died." The word landed like something physical. "She died," I said. "Cardiac event. 27 years old, no prior history. Her name was Melissa Huang. Her mother has been working with our office for the past 8 months." Renee reached into her cardigan pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. "He's been drugging you. We believe he's been dissolving something into your evening drinks for at least the past 4 months. Gradually, small enough doses that it reads as stress or fatigue. You've had blood work done recently. Your doctor flagged your potassium levels. I'd gone in 2 months ago because I couldn't get through a full school day without feeling like my legs were full of wet sand. My doctor had attributed it to grief and poor diet and suggested I take a multivitamin. My husband had been very supportive of that appointment. He'd driven me there himself." "He has a forged power of attorney document," Renee continued. "It names him as executor of your father's estate with full transfer authority. If he files it Monday morning, the Mooresville property and the life insurance proceeds go into an LLC he controls. By Tuesday, the money is offshore." I couldn't breathe right. The bathroom felt very small. "Why are you telling me this tonight?" "Because tonight is the night we have enough to move." She met my eyes. "And because I have a 7-year-old daughter and Melissa Huang's mother has a photograph of her daughter at 24 on her phone that she shows me every single time we meet. I didn't want to wait another week." I stood there for a long moment looking at this woman I had never seen before in my life. I thought about the green dress, the one he'd chosen. I thought about the champagne that had been poured before I arrived. I thought about the bottle of herbal sleep supplements he'd started buying in bulk 6 months ago, the ones he kept in the medicine cabinet and occasionally added to my chamomile tea because he said they helped with grief anxiety. I had been so grateful. I had thanked him for taking care of me. "What do you need me to do?" I said. She had a plan. Of course she had a plan. She'd been building this for 8 months. I had 4 minutes left before my husband would come back to the table and find me gone, so Renee gave me the short version. I would go back out. I would finish dinner. I would act exactly as normal as I was capable of acting. Tomorrow morning, I would call my father's estate attorney, a man named Richard Olson in Mooresville who had no relationship with my husband, and I would tell him to flag any power of attorney documents filed in my name. Over the weekend, I would find the sleep supplements and I would not throw them away. "Whatever he has given you to drink tonight," Renee said, "try not to finish it." I nodded. I unlocked the bathroom door. "One more thing." Her hand touched my arm briefly. "He is going to seem perfectly normal tonight. He's going to be warm and attentive and say things that remind you why you married him. That's not an accident. That's the job. Just remember that the job was always the job." I walked back through the hallway. My husband was already at the table, refilling his own glass, and when he saw me, he smiled. "Everything okay?" "Yes," I said. "Sorry, the line was long." I sat down. I picked up my champagne flute and moved it toward my mouth and did not drink. I set it down again with what I hoped was a natural lack of urgency. He was telling me about a restaurant he wanted to take me to in Savannah next month, a trip he'd been suggesting for weeks, and I nodded and smiled and kept my hands very steady in my lap and thought about Melissa Huang's mother with a photograph on her phone. I don't know how I got through dinner. I know I ate most of my sea bass and left the champagne and smiled at the right moments and asked about the Savannah restaurant like it was something I was looking forward to. My husband was, as Renee had said, perfectly normal, warm, attentive. He reached across the table and held my hand while we waited for the check, and I let him, and I did not let my face show what was happening inside my chest. In the car on the way home, he asked if I'd had a good anniversary. Perfect, I said. He squeezed my hand on the gear shift, and I looked out the window at the Charlotte skyline and counted the things I knew: the sleep supplements in the medicine cabinet, the power of attorney that didn't exist yet but would by Monday, the woman with the blue cardigan who had been sitting at a bar for however many nights waiting for a chance to reach me. I counted them like I was counting money, like they were mine to keep. That night, I waited until he was asleep. Really asleep. The deep breath kind, and I went to the master bathroom and I opened the medicine cabinet and I took the bottle of sleep supplements and I put them in my coat pocket in the hall closet. Then I went downstairs and I sat at the kitchen table in the dark and I texted Renee Calloway the number she'd given me on the folded paper. "I have the bottle. What do I do now?" Her reply came in under a minute. "Put it in a Ziploc bag. Handle it as little as possible. Don't confront him. I'll be in touch in the morning." I sat there for another hour listening to the house settle around me. The next 3 days were the longest of my life. Saturday morning, my husband made eggs and I watched him crack them into the pan, and I thought about every meal he'd ever cooked for me, every cup of tea, every glass of wine poured without asking. He was in a good mood. He talked about the Savannah trip again, asked me what I wanted to see, mentioned a hotel on the waterfront. I said it sounded wonderful. I drank my coffee before he could offer to pour it. Renee called at 9 while he was in the shower. The supplements had been sent overnight to the CMPD forensics lab. An initial screen suggested benzodiazepines, specifically a compound consistent with Xanax dissolved in liquid form. At low doses over time, the symptoms would look like anxiety, grief, general fatigue. My potassium crash was consistent with the dosage range. A full tox panel would take 48 hours to confirm. "He's been doing this for at least 4 months, she said. "Probably 6. I was standing in the laundry room with the door closed and the dryer running and my hand pressed flat against the wall because I needed something solid. "The woman who died," I said. "Melissa." She was his 3rd wife. Her tox screen came back clean at the time because the coroner wasn't looking for what we know to look for now. Her mother has petitioned to have the samples retested. We should have results by Monday. A pause. "Her mother's name is Janet. She has asked, when this is over, if she can meet you." I said yes. I didn't even have to think about it. My husband called out from the bedroom asking if I'd seen his gray jacket. "Hall closet," I called back. I waited until he left for what he described as a client meeting on Saturday afternoon, and then I drove to my sister's house in Concord and sat at her kitchen table and told her everything. Her name is Claire. She is 32, and she teaches spin classes, and she has never once in her life trusted my husband, which I had interpreted for 2 years as jealousy or personality conflict, or the particular friction between a sister and a brother-in-law who have nothing in common. I understand now that she was right and I had not wanted to hear it. She cried. I didn't. I had moved past the part where I could cry and into a harder, quieter place that felt something like calm but wasn't. "What do you need?" she said. "I need you to call the estate attorney in Mooresville Monday morning and tell him I'll be coming in. I don't want my husband to see a call from an attorney on my phone records." Claire looked at me across the table with something that was equal parts grief and something I can only describe as recognition. "You're going to be okay," she said. "I know," I said. And I meant it, which surprised me. Saturday night I went home and made dinner and ate across the table from my husband, and we watched a movie on the couch, and he fell asleep halfway through with his hand on my knee, and I sat there in the dark watching the movie alone, thinking about the fact that 4 months ago I had wept in this living room because I missed my father so much I couldn't see how to keep going, and this man had held me and told me I wasn't alone, and I had believed him. And he had gone upstairs after I fell asleep and dissolved something into my chamomile tea for the following morning. He had done that while I was crying. I want you to understand that detail because I think it matters. Not the fraud, not the forged documents, not even Melissa. The chamomile tea while I was crying. That is the thing that lives in the front of my mind when I think about who he actually is. Sunday, I found what I wasn't supposed to find. He went out again in the afternoon, gym bag over his shoulder, easy and unhurried, no sign of anything. I waited 15 minutes, then went to his home office and opened the bottom drawer of his desk, the one he kept locked, and I had never touched because he'd told me it was business files, confidential client stuff, and I had been a person who believed that kind of thing. The lock was a basic combination, his birthday. He used his birthday for everything. I had found that endearing once. Inside, a manila folder. Inside the folder, a document notarized in North Carolina, signed with a version of my signature that was close enough to fool anyone who hadn't spent time with my actual handwriting. Power of attorney, full estate transfer authority. My name, his name as executor, the Mooresville property address, the policy number from my father's life insurance, and a second document, a wire transfer form already filled out, a routing number in the Cayman Islands, the amount, $1.2 million. I photographed everything with my phone and put the folder back exactly as I had found it. I locked the drawer. I went to the kitchen and stood at the sink and ran cold water over my wrists, the way my mother used to tell me to do when I was a little girl and needed to calm down. And I thought about Melissa Huang at 27 with no prior cardiac history. And I thought about my father who died of a heart attack at 61, and I thought about how long a person can live next to something dangerous before they understand what it is. I texted Renee, found the document, photographed, putting it back. She replied, "Perfect. Don't touch anything else." Monday morning we move. He was chipper on Monday. That is the only word for it. He made coffee and asked if I wanted to go for a walk before work, and I said I had to leave early, a staff meeting, and he kissed me on the cheek and said, "Have a good day, sweetheart." And I drove to Mooresville and sat across from Richard Olson, the estate attorney, and watched his face go from polite attention to something very tight and controlled as he looked at the photographs on my phone. "This was filed Friday," he said. "What?" "Someone filed a version of this document with the county clerk's office on Friday afternoon. I didn't see it until this morning because—" He stopped. "Because I don't monitor incoming filings over the weekend. I should have." He picked up his phone. "I'm freezing the estate assets now. Every account, the property, all of it. He won't be able to transfer anything." "He'll know something went wrong," I said. "Yes." Richard looked at me steadily. "Are you safe at home?" I thought about the question. I thought about the way my husband had kissed me on the cheek this morning and called me sweetheart. I thought about how long he'd been planning and how little I'd known, and how much remained in his control if I moved too fast or not fast enough. "There's a detective involved," I said. "CMPD. She's been building this case for 8 months. Richard exhaled. "Call her, right now." Renee picked up on the first ring. She already knew about the filing. Her contact at the county clerk's office had flagged it at 8 that morning. The freeze would show up in his banking portal within the hour. And when it did, she said, she expected him to move quickly. "He's done this before," she said. "When the accounts freeze, his pattern is to try one more time with the wife. He'll have a story, system glitch, bank error. Just needs your signature on one more form. He'll be very calm, very reasonable. And if I say yes, you won't be saying yes alone." She walked me through it in the parking lot of the attorney's office. CMPD had a warrant. They needed him to attempt the transfer in a documented way, and the best way to do that was to give him the opportunity. I would go home. I would answer his calls. If he asked me to sign anything, I would agree and then text her before I signed a single word. "You've already done the hardest part," Renee said. "You kept the bottle. You didn't confront him. You were careful for 3 days when most people can't manage 3 hours. This is the last stretch." He called at 11:37. I was back in Charlotte, parked in my school's lot, watching second graders file in from the playground through my windshield. "Hey," he said, "warm, easy. No trace of anything. How's your morning?" "Good," I said. "Busy." "What's up?" "So I got an alert from the bank." A small laugh, self-deprecating. "Some kind of compliance hold on your dad's estate account. Totally routine. They do these sometimes when there's been a recent death in the family. Just a box to check." I called the bank and they said you just need to stop in and authorize the release, like 15 minutes. "Today," I said. If you can. I know you got school, but it would be nice to get it cleared up before the weekend. Another laugh. You know how these things pile up. I said I could probably stop by during my lunch break. He said that was perfect. He'd meet me there. They could grab a quick bite after. I texted Renee, he called. Wants me to sign at the bank at lunch. Branch on Providence. She replied, we'll be there. Gill about your morning. I taught reading comprehension to 23 7-year-olds for the next 2 hours. I don't know how. I remember explaining context clues. I remember a boy named Marcus asking if snakes could read and saying I didn't think they had the right kind of eyes for it, and the kids laughing and me smiling and thinking all the while about the bottle in a forensics bag somewhere in a CMPD lab. He was already at the bank when I arrived, standing near the entrance in his gray jacket, looking like exactly what he appeared to be, a handsome man in his mid-30s waiting for his wife. He smiled when he saw me crossing the parking lot. The same smile, the one that always looked real. The banker was a young woman at a desk near the back. She brought out a single-page authorization form, slid it across with a pen. My husband sat beside me. His leg didn't bounce. His hands didn't shake. He explained the whole to me again in the same easy tone. Routine compliance review. Just needs your signature. Should clear up overnight. I read the form. It wasn't a release of a compliance hold. It was a fund transfer authorization. The Cayman routing number was right there in the middle of the page. This looks different from what you described, I said. He blinked. Sorry, you said it was a compliance release. I kept my voice level. This says fund transfer. For just a moment, 1 second maybe less, something moved behind his eyes. Something that had no warmth in it at all. It's the same thing, he said. The compliance hold triggers when there's a pending transfer. Signing this clears both. I nodded slowly. I put the pen down on the desk. Can I use the restroom first? I said. He couldn't say no in front of the banker. Of course, he said. I went to the restroom and texted Renee a single word, now. When I came back, 2 plainclothes officers were standing in the lobby. My husband had his back to the door. He saw my face first, and then he turned, and I watched him understand what was happening in real time, the way a person reassembles a situation when the version they'd built no longer fits the facts in front of them. His face went through several things very quickly. I was watching for all of them. Daniel Mercer, one of the officers said, and my husband's jaw tightened at the sound of that name. Not his. We have a warrant for your arrest on charges of wire fraud, identity theft, and criminal administration of a controlled substance. This is a misunderstanding, he said. Still steady, still calm. I had to admire the architecture of it even as I watched it come apart. My wife and I are here to handle a banking matter. Ask her. They all looked at me. I've never seen that document before today, I said. And my husband's name isn't Daniel Mercer. He looked at me then. Really looked at me, and I think that was the first time in 2 years he actually saw me clearly. Not the inheritance or the policy number or the woman in the green dress he'd selected. Me. I held his eyes until they moved away. They handcuffed him in the bank lobby. He didn't fight it. He went quiet in that particular way. People go quiet when they've run their last option and know it, and a detective I hadn't met before led him toward the door and outside to a waiting car. The banker was very pale. I thanked her and apologized for the disruption. She said it was fine, which clearly it was not, and I walked outside into the November light. Renee was leaning against an unmarked car with her arms crossed and something that was almost but not quite a smile on her face. Tox panel came back this morning, she said, confirmed benzodiazepines in the supplement bottle, and the Melissa Huang retesting. She paused. Same compound, same concentration. Her mother's attorney has been notified. I nodded. My throat was tight. Janet Huang wants to talk to you, Renee said. When you're ready, no rush. I'm ready now, I said. The trial was 7 months later, late spring, the courthouse in uptown Charlotte on a day that was warm enough that people were eating lunch outside on the steps. My sister sat with me every day. Claire, who had never trusted him, who had been right all along, who had driven to every pre-trial hearing and brought me coffee each morning in a thermos because she knew I wouldn't stop to get any on my own. Tyler Bowman, that was the name they used in court. the one on his original birth certificate, the one before Richmond and before Memphis, had 3 prior identities documented, 4 marriages, and 1 death that could now be attributed to him. The prosecutors built the case on pattern, the same type of woman, recently bereaved, recently inherited, and the same method, quiet chemical erosion disguised as care. The supplements, the chamomile tea, the small gestures that look like attention. His defense attorney argued every marriage had been consensual. She argued the compound in the supplements could have been a contamination issue. She was skilled, and her arguments were not entirely without logic, and several times over the course of the trial I sat in the witness box and reminded myself that Renee had told me this would happen, that the defense's job was to make a jury doubt, and that my job was simply to tell the truth. I told the truth. I told them about the eggs on Saturday morning and the green dress he'd chosen, and the way he'd held me when I cried about my father. I told them about the tightness in my chest those last weeks, the days I'd come home from school and gone straight to bed, the slow heaviness that I'd attributed to grief, until a woman in a blue cardigan told me to listen to myself. I told them about the chamomile tea. Janet Huang testified on the 3rd day. She was 58 with her daughter's eyes, and she had a photograph of Melissa on her phone, a 24-year-old at a backyard birthday party in Austin holding a slice of cake and laughing at something off camera. And she set that photograph on the railing of the witness box in front of her and kept one hand resting on it while she spoke, as if she needed something to hold on to. The jury deliberated for 6 hours. Guilty on all counts. He got 31 years. No parole. I stood outside the courthouse with my sister and Renee and Janet Huang, and we didn't say anything for a while. And then Janet showed me the photograph on her phone and told me Melissa had been an environmental engineer who wanted to open a community garden someday, who had been learning Portuguese, who'd made the world's best chile verde from scratch. I looked at Melissa's face and I thought about all the things she'd been in the middle of when he found her. And I thought about what it had cost her mother to carry a photograph to a Charlotte courthouse and testify in front of strangers in order to tell a jury the truth about the man who had taken her daughter away. "Thank you," Janet said to me. I said she deserved better than him. You both did. The following spring, I founded Safe Signal, a nonprofit for women navigating financial and domestic fraud. We operate a hotline, cover legal consultation fees for victims who can't afford an attorney, and work with forensic accountants to document asset fraud in cases where law enforcement hasn't yet been able to pursue charges. Renee sits on our advisory board. Richard Olson, the estate attorney, serves as our pro bono legal counsel. My sister runs our volunteer coordination because it turns out the same personality that made her distrust my husband from day one makes her exceptionally good at helping other people trust their instincts. We've assisted 61 women in 14 months. We've helped recover $3.8 million in fraudulently transferred assets. We've been present in 4 criminal proceedings. And I have learned to drink my own coffee before anyone else touches it, which is a small thing, but it is mine. I think about the night at Magnolia's on 5th sometimes. The way I almost didn't check my phone. The way I looked up and saw a woman in a blue cardigan who had been sitting at that bar for 3 nights in a row waiting for a chance to reach me. I think about how thin the margin was. One more dinner, one more cup of tea, one Monday morning without a blue cardigan. I have sat with a lot of women in the past year who are still at that dinner table, who have not yet looked up from their plates. Some of them come to us because they found a document they weren't supposed to see. Some of them come because they've been tired for months in a way that sleep doesn't fix. Some of them come because a sister or a friend or a stranger at a bar kept trying to reach them until finally they answered. I want to say something to those women, and to you if any part of this story has caught somewhere in your chest. Trust that catch. That is the first warning. The second warning is the person in your life who was never fooled by him, the one you wrote off as jealous, the one whose calls you stopped answering, the one who didn't have a good reason to lie to you that you can actually name. Think about that person right now. Think about the last thing they said to you before you stopped listening. The third warning is the small evidence you kept and cannot explain why. The receipt, the bottle, the screenshot you never deleted. You kept it for a reason your mind hadn't caught up with yet. Don't throw it away. I used to believe that love meant not checking, That trust was a kind of voluntary blindness. I understand now that real love doesn't require you to stop seeing. It doesn't ask you to be tired or isolated or grateful for just enough attention to explain the distance. Real love does not pour the champagne before you arrive. The hotline number is in the description below. And if this story found you in a moment when you needed to hear it, please share it. You might be the blue cardigan for someone you love.